Mark to reject the proposal that will allow the IRS to track all bank transactions over $600 under the Biden plan. This is weaponizing the IRS. The Biden administration is beefing the IRS auditing up, expanding the agency's funding by dramatic leaps and bounds, and also increasing their power. They are now proposing that banks would be required to turn to the Internal Revenue Service all bank account information for accounts holding $600 or more. Now, Biden says this is to go after the rich, to make sure that the rich pay their taxes. I'm pretty sure the rich have more than $600 in their bank account. And I'm pretty sure a lot of people in this audience that would not consider themselves rich have at least $600 in their bank account. Every time you would deposit your paycheck, assuming that you make more than $600 a month or every 2 weeks, you would be reported to the IRS. And all of the activity that you do with your money and your bank account will be monitored. So 40 trade associations, some represent entire industries or economic sectors, signed a letter to the U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and Kevin McCarthy raising the alarm on this plan. The letter, which includes the support of several banking coalitions, calls on Congress to reject the requirement, saying it violates customer privacy and would create an incredibly expensive and elaborate reporting requirement for the banks. This is one, I believe, of their objectives. This is going to hit the community bank much harder than Citibank. Citibank has the money and the resources to hit any new federal requirement, but your local bank won't have that. So it will put pressure on your local bank to be able to even afford to do it, even if they didn't want to do it. If it's law, they'll have to. While the stated goal of this vast data collection is to uncover tax dodging by the wealthy, this proposal is not remotely targeted to that purpose or that population. In addition to the significant privacy concerns, it would create tremendous liability for all affected parties by requiring the collection of financial information for nearly every American without proper explanation of how the IRS will store, protect, and use this enormous trove of personal financial information. We believe that this is a program costly for all parties, not fit for purpose, and loaded with potential for unintended and serious negative consequences. It will target almost every American. Republicans on the House Ways and Means Committee are scheduling a virtual roundtable Wednesday entitled The Weaponization of the IRS, A Sordid History and Need for Taxpayer Protections. Could the GOP do more than a frickin' virtual roundtable? Do you really need to sit around a table and talk about this? Or can you act? Where is the GOP? So you know, if you're in a local bank and they haven't alerted you to this, you should call your local bank. If you are in a bank, Citibank, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, any of those big banks, I would not be doing business with them myself personally because they are benefiting from this private-public partnership with the government like nobody's business. They are also part of the ESG nightmare that is coming your way. I saw FNB Community Bank. This is a bank in Oklahoma. They put a consumer alert out, says, join us in telling Congress the proposed IRS bank account profiling is intrusive and indiscriminate for our customers. They explain it and then put a link there saying, here's how you contact Congress right away. You should do that, and you should move your money to a bank that is doing that. You need to have your money in a local bank. It is critically important. Also, Bloomberg is reporting inflation and supply shortages mean a return of empty shelves and panic buying. Please do not panic buy. Please get yourself prepared for food shortages. In my lifetime, I have only seen empty shelves in America at big, huge winter storms when everybody freaks out and hurricanes and things like that. That's when I'll see empty store shelves. Other than that, I've never seen them in America. You're starting to see shelves now that are looking an awful lot like the shelves in the former Soviet Union. If you're my age, you remember what those looked like. They had lines for toilet paper, lines for meat. Those things are coming this way. And don't believe that it is all about coronavirus. It isn't. You are being ushered into a new normal. I talked about this on last Wednesday night special. This is the new normal that is coming your way. Supply lines are struggling as producers such as Vietnam, responsible for making everything from sneakers to coffee, are hurt by COVID restrictions. It's not just the COVID restrictions. It's the fact that the United States government is paying people more money than they can make for working. So people at the docks, truckers, all these people who are choosing to stay home and take money from the government instead of going to work are the ones that are really hurting us. And just so you know, if you are one of those people, I understand the temptation. I do. Please don't do that. Please don't do that. You are changing the country. You're changing our work ethic. You're changing absolutely everything about us. Please go back to work. Also, Biden has now finalized the move to phase out potent greenhouse gases that are used in refrigeration and air conditioning. Headed for a new world, gang. 2022 National Defense Authorization Act, the NDAA, now contains a provision allowing military courts to issue orders restraining military personnel from possessing, receiving, or otherwise accessing a firearm. This is now in the 2022 National Defense Authorization Act. This is one reason why the Pentagon was told to root out all of the really crazy people, root out the dangerous people in our military. Really? This is to set in your mind the fact that our military has a lot of crazy people in it. Because once you believe that, it's just filled with extremists. Once you believe that, you will support their guns being taken away from them because they're a danger to us. One other thing I should point out, the approval of the U.S. Supreme Court. 2 years ago, it was 58%. 58% of Americans approved of the Supreme Court. Today, that number stands at 37%. 37% now agree and feel comfortable with the Supreme Court. That's a real problem to have the approval of the Supreme Court down that low. Why all of a sudden? So 20% say it's too conservative. 37% say it is too liberal. No, I'm sorry. Yeah, that's right. Too liberal is 20%. Too conservative is 37%. And the Supreme Court approval rating overall is at 40%. That's not good. That's not good. That will allow them, again, these seeds are being planted by whom? This is allowing them to be able to change the makeup of the Supreme Court. It is coming. One other story that I'm going to leave without comment for now. FBI agents are questioning now Afghan rescue groups. I'm going to read this from Politico. The FBI has been reaching out to members of veterans groups working to evacuate American citizens and at-risk Afghans and inquiring about their activities, in at least one case, visiting a group leader at his home. Agents have visited, emailed, and called members of Task Force Pineapple and Task Force Dunkirk, two of the prominent organizations, and other groups with a host of queries. The Bureau has asked groups about financial records to provide manifest and to make sure no federal laws are being violated, according to 8 group members and congressional aides familiar with the moves. In one instance, agency officials showed up at the home of Scott Mann, founder of Task Force Pineapple, who has been on this program. Such visit is normal for the FBI, and the group fully cooperated. Some of the people described the outreach as nothing out of the ordinary and part of the growing public-private partnership on evacuations. In my mind, the FBI was trying to be helpful, not intimidating, said a person familiar with the outreach. Others saw it differently. Anytime you get visited by the FBI or contacted by an entity like that, it is concerning, said one person affiliated with the groups who, like others, spoke on the condition of anonymity to discuss a sensitive topic. That's interesting. I would have said 5 years ago, 10 years ago, of course, the FBI should be visiting all of us. Now I'm not so sure. FBI spokesperson declined to comment. After Kabul fell in mid-August, dozens of volunteer groups made up for former U.S. special operators, aid workers, intelligence officers, and congressional staffers and others with experience in Afghanistan cropped up to help with the evacuation effort. Some of the members launched missions to shepherd evacuees to safety, while others coordinated meetup points at the airport from afar over WhatsApp and other messaging apps. Since the American military operation officially ended August 31st, the groups have continued their evacuation work. The Biden administration has taken heat for the withdrawal and chaotic scenes around Hamid Karzai International as desperate people tried to flee the country. Some of the groups and individuals working on evacuation efforts are wading into potentially muddy legal waters. For instance, hiring for-profit contractors for security and escort services. We're not doing that, by the way. Eric Prince, a former Navy SEAL officer and founder of a private military company, Blackwater, offered people seats on a chartered plane out of Kabul for $6,500 per person. Again, we're not doing that. The FBI initially reached out to Task Force Pineapple when it recorded a substantial increase in the amount of money an associated 501c3 nonprofit bank account. They believe the FBI was notified when the bank filed suspicious activity reports due to the change, kind of like the $600 thing. But other veterans groups are not doing the right thing, said the FBI. We've heard of groups that are soliciting money on false claims about their efforts, and we've heard of groups that are taking actions which undermine the legitimacy of other groups. We've heard that as well. Others said the calls were not welcome. One congressional source familiar with the calls said FBI officials intended to spook members. Another said the calls were designed to intimidate. One person familiar with the call said the FBI doesn't want groups offering bribes or paying the Taliban to evacuate people from Afghanistan. We don't do that either, as those practices raise human trafficking concerns. Further, this congressional person said one of the groups that received a call was Glenn Beck's Nazarene Fund. Beck has brought attention to his organization's activities, praising Pakistani Prime Minister Imran Khan on Twitter for acting on his willingness to assist. The Nazarene Fund didn't respond to a request for comment. We will continue that at this time. Back in a minute. A little bit about what I mean by that. We're going to go to Australia here in a second, so I don't want to get into it and then have to stop. Years ago, 10 years ago, this stopped, but there was about a 5-year period, and I don't think I've ever said it this plainly, but I would tell you that I didn't get these things. I'm not smart enough to predict what's coming, and I was really bad at timing, and I believe those were all from promptings, and I used to be woken up every night, either at 1 a.m. or 3 a.m., and it was almost like taking dictation, and those stopped about 10 years ago. It started again Saturday, and I believe that I was prompted to share a couple of things with you, and I will do that coming up in about 40 minutes. This is the Glenn Beck program. I don't know about you, but I've been trying to follow what's going on in Australia, and I can't get any of the news stories to match the video. The news stories say that it was a bunch of neo-Nazis dressed as construction workers, and the police did no wrong, et cetera, and that may be the story. However, the video I am seeing a video of construction workers, throwing bottles and everything else. But then I'm also seeing other videos where the police are just taking people off the streets and just beating them, Birmingham style. I don't know what the truth is. Avi Yemeni is the Australia bureau chief for the Rebel News, a journalist in Australia that has been following this. Avi, welcome to the program. What the heck is happening?
I know it can sound very confusing. I think it's also confusing for Aussies that are here. But I for Rebel News, was in amongst it from the beginning, and I can tell you right now, there's no Nazis there. It was the media really wants you to believe that, and the unions want you to believe that. That's the narrative that makes it easy for them to avoid taking any responsibility. But essentially what happened in short is last week there was a mandate. There's a mandate to be introduced for the construction industry. And as you can imagine, there's a lot of union members which feel like it's their union's job to represent and fight for their rights. That's essentially the one thing they pay membership for. So they decided to go outside the union headquarters, the construction union headquarters, and to speak to the union boss. Now, it was about 9 hours outside that office, and they kept pushing off. The boss kept pushing off when he's going to come down and speak to his members until they gave an hour deadline. He'd said he was going to come down to talk to them, and suddenly news hits this crowd, which ended up being, by that point, about 2,000 members strong. Mostly 99% of them are construction workers union Labor voters which are like Democrats. Mm-hmm. So certainly not far-right Nazis. And suddenly the news hits the crowd that the boss is actually on the radio telling the audience, telling the state that it's just crazy far-right extremist anti-vaxxers outside, and he doesn't know what they want from him. So obviously that didn't go down too well with the crowd, and that's where the violence actually started. Now, the videos you're seeing the next day and the following day was an escalation certainly by the police, and you had, once the rest of the members had seen that, so the next day you had probably 10 times that number roaming the streets. There was certainly violence on both sides, but having said that, the police escalated to a point where they essentially turned their counter-terrorism capabilities on the civilian population, on these construction workers. In short, in summary, I think the government overstepped it and picked on an industry that until now they haven't done an industry that would fight back and did fight back immediately and is continuing to fight back until for the previous 18 months it's been, 70-year-old grandmas that have been pepper spraying in the face. And now it's certainly a part of the population that won't take it lying down, and we can see how that is working. We're seeing those videos you're seeing is just capturing those moments, and so police are certainly coming in very hard to anyone.
I want to show the video while we continue to have our conversation. There was some video that I saw last night of some people that were just pulled off the streets. They were walking down the street one side, and the police come from across the street and just push this guy. Another one wings him down to the ground, and they just start beating on him.
Oh my God! Oh my God!
This is a different one, but here's here's the police beating on this guy. Play the other clip, please. Can you play the other clip? Hopefully.
So they're stopping anyone that obviously looks like a construction worker.
By myself, going for a walk, trying to get back to work.
So you're here for a lawful reason?
Lawful reasons always. The cops with the guns, just one of them looks at me, just sprints across the road, and they just drop me, all like 5 of them on top of me, just smashing me for no reason.
So why'd they pull you up?
Oh, just for being here, basically, yeah.
Are you within your 10Ks?
Yeah, I live in South Melbourne. I just walked here. My watch is still going, 4.2 Ks.
Stop for a second. That's the guy who was beaten down to the ground. You remember talking to him, Avi? The guy with the orange hat, by any chance?
Of course, he's a construction worker, and that's the story we're hearing from all these construction workers, is that they're being targeted because essentially the government, when that escalated outside the headquarters, the government shut down the entire construction industry for what they said was going to be a snap 2-week lockdown for that industry. And so basically anyone walking around looking like a construction worker was fair game for the police. And there's been zero accountability. We've seen throughout this pandemic, the police think they are above the law at the moment with their new emergency powers. So if you look like a suspect, they will beat you and ask questions later.
How are the people in Australia reacting to this? Are they buying into the Nazi thing?
I think for the first 24 hours, yes. The government, the media, the union certainly had the narrative down pat. People believed it. But to be fair, when people saw the Rebel News story where we actually interviewed, everybody in that crowd, we were walking around just interviewing it, and it became quite clear that they were union members. And the very next day, they changed the way they spoke about the crowd, and suddenly they were talking about, elements that were far right and far right provocateurs. I think that was probably their way to blame me for this, for their issues. But the fact of the matter is, it very much was an organic explosion of outrage that they brought onto themselves, and they have no one but themselves to blame. And I think the government misjudged it. It was they got away with it for 18 months in Melbourne. We've been in lockdown. We are the most lockdown city in the world, most lockdown with the harshest restrictions, and people have complied. But now they've taken on an industry which, these are people that live paycheck to paycheck. Take away that paycheck, you've given them no other choice but to stand up and fight for it.
So what is coming towards Australia? Common sense and a reversal of these things, or chaos?
It's a tough question. You know what? The last week certainly indicates chaos is coming, and I'm hoping at the end of it, whether it's chaos or it settles straight away, I'm hoping common sense is what does prevail.
Well, I saw the video of the police running into the city park, firing into the backs of people, rubber bullets, but they were still firing rubber bullets into the backs of people as they were running away from the police. I don't think I've ever seen that.
Glenn, I've been in war zones, and some of the stuff I'm seeing here in Melbourne, I just cannot believe my eyes. I was covering a peaceful march of those construction workers, and they were literally walking, probably 1,000 strong, walking, peacefully marching, chanting, and out of nowhere, these armored, vehicles that you see at the front lines of a battlefield suddenly confront them, and counter-terrorism police run out of the vehicle and start firing indiscriminately into the crowd and firing tear gas, throwing tear gas canisters. It's incredible. And to think that, all these tools that they've been given over the last few years in the name of, counter-terrorism is now being used on the people that funded it to protect themselves through their taxes. It's scary, and it makes you think all the things that they're passing now under the guise of public health, what is it going to be used for next? Just like they're misusing and abusing counter-terrorism things. It's an eye-opener, and people need to wake up.
From Rebel News in Australia, Avi Yemeni. Avi, thank you so much. Please stay in touch with us, because we can't make heads or tails from it here.
Anytime, mate. Thanks
Thank
for
you.
me.
You bet. Rebel News. You can follow Rebel News, rebelnews.com.au for Australia. Okay, our sponsor this half hour.